that now. Open in the middle of the meeting. My absence. Oh yes, yeah. Like a stack. Yeah, he was after. He was like, "Good, I can do this on my laptop, right?"
All ready to go?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. All right, it is 1 o'clock, so I'll call this the May 24th Regional Board meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. I want to recognize that we're holding the meeting on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation. We have an agenda in front of us. I don't know of any changes to that. If anybody has any, please vocalize them now. Otherwise, we get a motion to adopt the agenda. That'd be great. Director Gisborne, seconded Director Lennox. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Item 3, adoption of the minutes of the regular board meeting, April 26, 2023. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I get a motion? Thank you, Director Gisborne. Again, Director Lennox. All in favor of adopting the minutes? Any opposed? Motion carries. Delegations and inquiries. I understand we have an unregistered delegation, if that's okay with everybody on the board. Yeah, I see some thumbs up. Okay, so whom do we have?
Thank you, Chair. Danielle Cochrane is joining us today. She's here virtually.
Ms. Cochrane, there you are. You got your camera on.
Hi.
You can, you're here as an unregistered delegation. You've got 10 minutes. You can make a presentation to the board, but it's that's exactly what it is, a presentation. The directors can then ask questions of you that they see fit, and have another 5 minutes for that afterwards. So the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm going to need the full 10 minutes. It's in regard to the decommissioning of the Shelter Point Park concession. I'm a prior operator. I operated it for, I don't know, about half of 2020. I came in late, and then all of 2021. And I've put my hand up to say that I am absolutely willing to bid on it for next year. I can't this year. I've got too many obligations with my current business and travel plans that I just absolutely refuse to put off. I know that the in the article in the Peak, I believe the quotation is staff have had conversations with the operators over the past years, and the concession does not operate at a profit because there's not enough consistent business over the summer. This is not the case. It is a profitable business. I turned a profit both years. It was not huge. You know, nobody's ever going to get rich off of the concession, but I was able to cover my costs and make a little bit of money. I'm also a bookkeeper by trade, and I have done the books for myself and the two operators prior to me and the one after me. And without getting into too much detail, because of course I can't, I can say that most of those operators would agree with me on that point. I know staff is an issue. I think that knowing what I know now, after having done it for a couple of years, I would reduce the hours that are open. Then you wouldn't need as much staff. And I do know I have, 3 sitting in the hopper that have said if I ever did it again, they would come back in a heartbeat. So staff is always a challenge. I think that that's probably going to be the way of the world going forward. I don't know that it's unique to Texada. But I do think it's something that you can get around if you're willing to work the concession as the operator, which I would do. What else was there? It's not COVID anymore, which is nice. I was the operator through COVID in 2020 and 2021. That presented a bunch of challenges as well as cost. Everything had to be single-use, disposable. There were PPE requirements that, you can't ask the staff to take on themselves, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that would reduce some cost as well, not having that to deal with. Yeah, I'd like to have another shot at it. I think that it would be a huge loss to the island. But probably I would say 90% of my business came from the locals. It actually wasn't very many park visitors that spent money at the concession when I was operating it. I can't speak for the other operators. But it would be, the last day the kids are in the parents' hair, so they would give them $5 and send them down for some fries just to, get rid of them for a little bit, for lack of a better way to put it. Yeah, that's basically what I have to say. If you have any questions, I'm here. Pick my brain.
Okay, thanks very much. Do any of the directors have questions for Ms. Cochrane? Director Gisborne.
Thank you. I'll actually hand it over to Director McCormick because it's her area. And
okay, let's start with.
I didn't see your hand up.
Okay, well, my question is very quick. Danielle, thank you very much for your presentation. It's really interesting to hear from a former operator as to what your experiences were and the fact that it was profitable for you. My quick question is are you interested in a multi-year contract, like doing it for more than just the 1 year?
Absolutely.
Thank you. How many years, like 2 or 3 years, would you think that was doable?
I would say 3 years is probably the maximum that I would sign in concrete, with option for renewal, of course, if that's available. But yeah, I think 3 years would be the tops that I would do.
Okay, thank you. And one quick follow-up then, Chair. Supplies. Have you got a system worked out for getting supplies in a timely manner?
I don't know that it would be much different than I did before. I used Cisco for the majority of my food goods and a lot of my paper products and serviceware and stuff like that. Texada Transfer was fantastic at getting it to me. You just got to make sure you're down there when the truck shows up. That's, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Director Gisborne.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm a little out of it today, but I just wanted to get some clarification on your presentation. You said that the concession stand has operated at a profit in the past, like when you were doing it, and you've had similar things with taking a look at the bookkeeping from the previous operators as well. Is that my understanding? Okay, and the other question I had was, did our staff reach out to you to get your input prior to this report coming out?
No, they didn't. I actually sent an email to Patrick Devereaux. I can't remember the exact date. It was mid-April, because when I closed down, him and I, stood outside the concession and talked about why I wasn't doing it again and all of that sort of stuff. And we did back and forth a little bit about, the prospect of food trucks and that sort of thing. So I saw the writing on the wall, and that's what prompted me. When it's a small island, so we all know each other. And, we kind of knew that nobody bid. So I sent him a note and just kind of said, hey, if just so that you guys know, I can't do it this year, but I will very likely bid for 2024, was the email that I sent to him, paraphrasing a little bit, of course.
Okay, that's all my questions. I might have other questions, but the conversation is starting to become a bit of like a contract negotiation, which is in-camera discussion. So I'm gonna leave.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions from the directors? I just want to add a note that I think staff did due diligence in this instance. And did all the investigation that was required of it. But thank you very much, Ms. Cochrane, for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for hearing me.
No unfinished business. We're on to correspondence. We have 3 items of correspondence in front of them. One was from Ms. Cochrane herself. Item 7, as with all the items of correspondence are known to be received already. Is there any business arising from correspondence? Dr. Paul.
Item 6.2 has something.
Okay.
Can I do it right now? So Ms. Dubois, Ocean Legacy is asking for a letter of support from us, and I would like to move that the board provide a letter of support for their funding application. with suitable wording by our corporate officer, that would help to make that so.
Coming up with something as we speak. And I think I saw Director McCormick second that. Yeah. Maybe we'll just.
And there's a sample letter there, so hopefully it's not too much effort to do.
Just give us 1 second. We'll have the motion in front of you. Okay, can everybody see that? So, we made the motion, we have the seconder. Is there any discussion? Seeing no hands up, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Any other business arising from correspondence? Seeing no hands, we'll move on to here's reports. So, what do I have here? It's kind of a busy month, but I'll get through it quickly. April 26th, Director, this is going back because it was post our last board meeting, but April 26th, Director Gisborne and I attended the AGM of the Cabin Owners Association. Chris Rodden from Evolution presented, and we heard some of the concerns that cabin owners in our area have. On April 28th, I was happy to represent the Catholic Regional District at the annual Workers' Day of Mourning at the ceremony. Dowd and Elliott were also in attendance at the solemn event. It was a beautiful day, well put on. There's quite a few people in attendance, so I was glad to be there. On May 8th, the CAO and I attended an online meeting discussing the current environmental conditions around the province, specifically having to do with the threat of wildfires and flooding. And although the province is in general drier than usual, as we're not caught up from the lack of rain last year, there's hope that a wet June will help out. The Catholic Regional District, as you can imagine, was not identified as one of those areas of higher concern, but that doesn't mean we can be lax. We still have to remain vigilant in order to prevent forest fires from happening in our area. On May 10th, Director Dowd and I met with representatives from other area groups with interest in community health, but I will let him, as a chair of the hospital district, report on that. On May 25th, which is tomorrow, I'm looking forward to attending the Royal Canadian Air Cadets ceremonial review as a representative of the QRD. And then on Saturday, I'm filling the same role with the Royal Canadian Army Cadet Corps. So I have not attended either of those events in the past. It should be interesting. Moving on to the director's report. On May 8th, had my library trustees meeting. We received the results of our annual audit, other than one suggested change as to how assets are amortized. Everything was in order. April was poetry month, so there were a lot of activities centered around that. And a Bollywood dancer was brought in by the library to perform for the students at Westview Elementary. And if anybody's curious as to why it was Westview Elementary and not the other schools, they can't possibly get these special events around to everybody, so they rotate them. So one might get a Bollywood dancer, the next one gets a magician, that sort of thing. So everybody eventually gets to see something special. May 10th, Stillwater Community Advisory Group. It was the last one before the summer break. And it was basically just taking a little care of a little housekeeping and looking at the differences between the old CSA standard and the new PEFC standard. So Western Forest Products is abiding by a different standard these days, but it's largely the same as the last one. So we discussed the summer field trip and wished everyone well and had a happy summer. And on May 13th, even though I wasn't able to attend because I was out of town at a karate tournament, Lang Bay had their annual Lang Bay Garden Plant and Craft Sale. And I heard it was a great success. The weather was fantastic. So I imagine it got everybody thinking about their gardens. And one other thing I did at some point during the month was I completed the cybersecurity course that our IT department suggested we all take part in. And I encourage everybody to get on that. It did not take too much time. It was not very challenging, but it was quite informative. So That's all I've got. Director Dell, how about we go to you first?
Okay. Seems like a long time ago, or at the beginning of the month. I did attend the day of mourning ceremony up at the cemetery with Director Brander, the mayor of Fall River, and a number of other people who are interested in health and safety and the survival of workers on the job. And that was the Memorial Day. I've attended those, I think, since about 1991, and intend to continue. Later, just a very short time later, I went to the meeting of Cassette Supportive Housing, their community relations group, and talked about how things are going there. They're basically being able to communicate a lot more and emerging from the COVID restrictions, getting more in touch with the community and looking forward to improvements in supportive housing in the future. On Friday, the 5th of May, I went to, on behalf of the regional district, to a local government liaison meeting with Vancouver Coastal Health. There were representatives of the city there. The Cassette Regional Hospital representatives were there, and Vancouver Coastal Health representatives were there, basically starting to open up communications again, which have been on a hiatus, I'd say, since COVID struck, and it's reaching out and trying to get a better communication. And I think that was well received by all the people that are there. We just need to follow through with a little bit more of it. I did have a Vancouver Coastal Health relationship discussion with various other groups that are included in the relationship with Vancouver Coastal Health in the area, but that was part of the Regional Hospital District, and I'll report on that in more detail at a hospital district meetings. And that brings us to today.
Thanks very much. Interesting to see how everything is progressing now with the housing and any agreements we can get with different players in the Vancouver Coastal Health. I'll certainly help out our situation. Director Lennox.
Yeah, like you say, the month goes by fast, but there's pretty busy. I don't know about the rest of you. April 26th, I happened to be in Texas for work, and I did take a moment for the day of mourning. And as Director Doubt said, it's important to realize people that are, profoundly impacted or even fatally killed at work every day around the world, and even here in our town, working for an employer that's had that in their history. You take a moment and you work with people's families that's happened to them. It's pretty profound. So took a moment for that. Was able to participate in the Parks and Trails open house, the strategy with Megan Turnock from Lee's Consulting. Very thorough, and really they're quite a ways down the path now of their timeline for the project. We had a couple other directors in attendance, so I thought it was interesting to, as the presentation was rolling out, to be able to submit answers to their queries in real time. So it made you think fast. So that'll be interesting to see what the full results of that are. Obviously on our agenda today, and lots of discussion around the Northside Community Recreation Center, and I'm working with the Lund Community Society, seems like almost every day now, with their building committee. So I'm happy to be part of the building committee to just help them in any way I can and liaise with the QRD if that's necessary. We actually have a meeting, I believe it's tomorrow, with staff in the evening. So that'll be interesting to see and get that project underway and moving ahead. A lot of discussion in the community on that. So we'll talk about that later. Meeting with my alternate a little more lately, and pressed her into service last month while I was in Texas. And so it's nice to meet with her again this week, actually. Got out to Craig Park and had a look around at some surveying that we've done there to really establish the one side of the property with the neighbor we have. And I hadn't been out there for a long time and seen the disc golf and all the different improvements. So really interesting for me. We spent a lot of time there. It was last week in the grant and aid review. Again, very educating for me, and lots of good presentations. been trying to get out there and broom bust as much as I can. Broom's quite a nasty invasive species that I know pops its head up everywhere. So I'm trying to do my part to help our community. And if you see me on the side of the road, that's probably what I'm doing with my loppers. Got on to the AVICC, AVICC committee meeting last week, and there's been some good updates. Mr. Devereaux might update us there on the Indian Point boat launch is now approved, and there's going to be some improvement discussions. The RCMP gave us an update, the latest on the dock and shed work and the bike area cleanup. So lots of different things, and in related note, working with CIMAC. Sorry, that was a CIMAC community minutes, and AVICC has a lot of those same points that they've been working on too with the community. So it was interesting to tie those two together. And finally, Savory Island, like a lot of areas, the volunteer fire department has issued a complete fire ban now for obvious reasons. And you made some really prescient comments there on hazard of fires. We actually, my family had some refugees from Alberta show up at our doorstep, family members that we were able to take in for the week. So it hit home for us. And if you're out in the bush anywhere in our areas, it's very dry. So lots more, but that's it for today.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, lots of stuff happening up there. And I imagine there's a lot of happy people with the way the vote went to the new rec center, and it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that one.
Went both ways, right? There was 38% voted no. So we've, the building committee has definitely acknowledged the issues that they brought up and have to take action to the best of their ability on those.
Yeah, hopefully we can get to a point where most everybody's happy with it, sees the value it brings to the community. Let's go up to the screen, Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. On the 7th of May, I attended the 60th anniversary celebration of the Gillies Bay Improvement District. They had fire hall tours and a barbecue and birthday cake, and very well attended. On the 16th, I attended the virtual open houses, which I think Director Lennox already mentioned. But I just want to add a little bit about the parks and green space strategy, what they're talking about in draft form. There were 5 goals presented. One is to identify, acquire, and manage new parks and trails. A second goal is to increase protection and management of natural areas. A third is to strengthen the community partnerships and the volunteer resources. The fourth goal is to enhance the user experience at the parks and beach access points. And the fifth, supporting active transportation and a connected community. So these are very lofty goals, lots of input. And so it will be great to see what the consultants do with these draft goals and the inputs proceed. So we'll kind of stay tuned on that. On the 18th, I attended the policing committee, which is now called the Public Safety Committee here on Texada, and a number of concerns raised about the use of drugs and the lack of resources for both harm reduction and prevention aspects of managing the issues. So a lot of concerns raised there, no answers, unfortunately. On the 23rd, which was yesterday, I attended the board meeting of Tourism Powell River, and it was kind of pick on senior government day. To begin with, this is the first year in recollection that Tourism Powell River has not received a federal grant to operate, to hire summer students for the Visitor Information Center. There were no Visitor Information Centers in our riding that were approved, and I know the board is quite disappointed about that. They're not very happy with the province either, because a number of letters have been sent in to Tourism Powell River regarding the condition of Inland Lake Trail and the bridge there. Apparently it's in quite a state of disrepair, and it is not being well maintained, although it is provincial parkland. So the board is going to follow up with provincial officials in the ministry's office and also with the South Coast region for the parks. So that will happen. And that concludes my report. Thank you very much, Chair.
Great, thank you very much, Director McCormick. Boy, I hope they get somewhere with that Inland Lake trail, because it is, I saw the photos, it is in a pretty sorry state right now, and somebody's gonna get themselves injured out there.
Yeah.
Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. On May the 6th, a ceremony to honor ancestors, especially those who lived on Chloé, was held on Lesquiti with people from 3 First Nations and led by an elder, with a lot of organization on island, in particular by Dr. Dana Lepovsky, who's an archaeologist. It was a moving experience for the more than 100 people who participated. The ceremony was held in an open field above a bay, small islands, and Texada for a backdrop, and was followed by a shared potluck meal at the hall. One of the teachings from the elder who led the ceremony was the importance for everyone, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, past, present, and future, to care for and share the land in a good way. On May the 13th, Jesse McDonald came down from the Powell River for the QRD to hold an emergency evacuation workshop, in particular to discuss the emergency supplies container, which is now installed by the community hall. It looks great. It's right beside the old generator shed, and about, I think, 12 to 15 people showed up to talk about the container, have a tour of the container. It was very nice to see it full of supplies, talk about what else could be put in it, as well as the mechanism for how items from the community might be added to it, and developing a wish list. Jesse's done these workshops elsewhere, so I think in the regional district, so I think there will be a big list of items that could be considered. A lot of thoughtful input, and she also put out some maps. It was interesting exercise she had, where she had maps of Lesquiti Island and had people break into groups and just identify assets and risks, and different evacuation routes and different elements of the community related to emergency evacuation. And finally, last week, I was called as an expert witness in a long and significant case in the Supreme Court of BC related to my strategic planning work on Haida Gwaii. While the details are not relevant to this board, it did provide an opportunity for the board to meet my alternate Chloé Garside last week, to whom I am grateful for filling in for me at the Finance Committee meeting. And looking forward, it will also make it easier for me to plan around QRD related events, since this is now in the rearview mirror. And with that, I will end my report. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thanks, Director Fall. Yeah, I was able to attend one of Jesse McDonald's emergency preparedness conference, or workshops, I guess, when she had it down in Area C, and I was really pleased. It's very thorough, and there's a lot of good conversation that came from the people who were in attendance. I imagine the same was on Lesquiti. Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. As many of you know, I wasn't in attendance of last week's Finance Committee meeting. There's been some issues at home with getting my father's care needs looked after. We waited for over a month to hear back from Vancouver Coastal Health about offering respite, so that way the workers wouldn't get burned out. After a month, they came back and said, no, we're not going to offer any respite because they don't even want to come up with a plan to look after him. There was concern about burnout, so he was admitted into hospital, and within 2 days, they figured from his blood work that he'd had a heart attack while he was in there. I took a look at his chart when I came in on day 3. It was a mess of the medications. We took him out. He didn't even know where he was, and he has since been recovering at home. It is extremely frustrating dealing with Vancouver Coastal Health. The CECL program has not seen an increase in funding in their hourly rate in years. And the only other option they seem to be offering is MAID. So I'm not very pleased with senior level government today. And other than that, I do recall going to the float cabins meeting with Director Brander. And that's the end of my report. That's why I wasn't here last week. And we'll see what happens.
Well, our thoughts are with you and the family. I hope your dad is doing better, and sorry to hear about all the challenges you've been facing.
Thank you, Chair. So a month's a long time to report out on, so if I miss anything, I apologize for that. I did attend the day of mourning along with others here. I also attended the Missing Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls and Two-Spirited Peoples candlelight service on Willingdon Beach. I think it was May 5th. I attended the community health senior government and local government meeting, along with a few others that was already mentioned. I do that on behalf of the city, though. I did have the air cadet ceremony on my schedule for tomorrow evening. I met with Michelle Hanna, who is the director of operations here for Vancouver Coastal Health. We agreed that she would meet with me monthly for a while until we could determine whether we were helping the communication in our community. So I brought concerns from the Westview Ratepayers Society with me to that meeting. We discussed most of the things on that list. They committed to get back to me in writing about those concerns. So people in the community who have concerns about Vancouver Coastal Health operations and would like me to bring them to future meetings are welcome to contact me and describe what it is their concerns are, and I can bring those forward and hopefully get answers for people. That's kind of what we're hoping to do, is improve communications between local people who rely on Vancouver Coastal Health Services and Vancouver Coastal Health, the organization, and how they're operating here in our particular area. I've explained that I'm not there to make decisions on behalf of the city or the RD or anything, just facilitating conversations between the community and representing people and their concerns. She was fine with that. I was invited to attend and did attend a tour of the trails some of the trails in our community forest that are just past the boundary of Duck Lake Park, where we've got some logging operations going on. And so the purpose of the tour was people who work on trails for bike riders and hikers and whatnot wanted to show where the community forest had done things to help facilitate the trails and work with people, and where they had done things that were maybe not so helpful. And so they were just kind of trying to point out when efforts were made, they worked out pretty good. And when efforts were not being made, it, created huge windfalls across trails and things like that. So I went on that tour and walked around and looked at that and understood what the point was around the operations around the community forest and how they may or may not be considering the needs of people who have trails in their operation. Where am I here? I did attend a supportive housing advisory group meeting as well, and I will continue to do that. It was very informative. It's the first one I'd attended in quite some time, so that was good. I did miss a BC Ferries advisory group meeting because it had a conflict with the Regional District Finance Committee meeting, but I spent a few minutes getting caught up with Councillor Palm, and I believe I understand the gist of what happened at that meeting. And most of it was focused on the things that we had brought up with the senior government during our previous meeting, the Blubber Bay wanting the expanded expansions and the possibility of better service to Texada and so forth. There was some conversations, of course, on the medical travel, and there was a give on that one. I understand that people who have medical travel and want a reservation can now get a reservation without paying the fee for the reservation. And if you can't get a reservation because they're all full, you can phone a number and they will make sure you get on the ferry of your choice because you have medical travel. At least that's what I got secondhand. I did attend the Triangle Gardens memorial for Andy's garden, and it was wonderful. It was a while ago, but I think it was in this reporting period. There were a few of the rest of the folks out there as well. I noticed we were well attended by the local government. I also fit in a trip north to my own traditional area of the Kiunga Valley near the Skeena River. I had to drive through the flooded Cache Creek to get there. They had, at that time going up, they had opened it to one-lane traffic, but you had to drive through flooding roads, waters that were going over the highway to get through. So if you had one of those old fashioned Volkswagens that floats when you go, you might not have made it. So it did really show me how hard that was on the community of Cache Creek, because basically all the businesses along that strip for the entire time they were doing that were not getting their usual through traffic business because people were just getting through and moving along. It's difficult to stop at any of the businesses. The people were 24 hours a day working on this, piloting people through. It was pretty stressful for the community, and it made me think how important it is to have our emergency crews ready and planning for things such as this. My heart went out to the community of Cache Creek, and so I just thought I'd let people know that it didn't look fun there in Cache Creek when it was flooding. And that's my report.
Okay, thanks. Well, we're glad you made it back safely. You don't have a Volkswagen, I guess.
I know, right?
Moving on to the consent agenda. Everybody has an opportunity to take anything out of the consent agenda. Director Dow.
I'd like to remove item 10.12, both 1 and 2.
Okay, 10.12 is now the, I guess, 11.1. Director McCormick.
Thank you. I'd like to remove 10.8, Shelter Point Park Concession.
Okay. Good point. Anything else? Director Gisborne.
10.3.
10.3 is now 11.3. Anything else? Okay. Being none, do we have a motion to adopt the consent agenda with the appropriate changes? Director Gisborne and Director McCormick. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. So let's go to 10.12 first. And okay, we have a motion. Director Dow.
Yeah, so I'd just like to make a motion slightly different than the one in the package, very different. But I'd like to move that the board, in collaboration with the Tla'amin Nation and the City of Powell River, reinstate community to community C3 forums, period. And if there's a seconder, I'll explain that.
I'll second.
Director Gisborne.
I just wanted to correct the grammar in there to make sure that it appears that we're sending out, if I would call it this, an olive branch or an invitation to the other two local governments to try to get together and find a way to resume the C3 morning meetings. It's not us directing the other two about what they should do, but it's an invitation to try to work cooperatively and collaboratively to make this go and to do something valuable for the community. So very small change, but I spent quite a bit of time reviewing the tapes of the previous meeting that we had on May 3rd and looking at what was said. And I think this is a more accurate depiction of what actually happened at the meeting and what the board wants to do.
Okay. So while we're doing, just because we don't have it written down in front of us, is essentially the second half of the motion is being moved up to be placed after board. So, yeah, corporate officer.
Just to make sure I have it cleared that the board, in collaboration with Tla'amin Nation and the City of Powell River, reinstate community to community to community C3 forum.
That's what I heard, Director Dow.
What I thought I said.
Okay, perfect. We're all on the same page here. Director Elliott.
Part of the original motion was support for reinstating C3 and with our partners, or if we were unable to get all three, that we would go ahead and go with community to community, that we were willing to proceed without the city if that was necessary. And so that has been cut out of this motion, and I'm not really in favor of that. I think we can go forward with conversations with Tla'amin Nation in a bilateral way if we can't get all three members at that table. I think that starting those conversations is important, and it should be a priority for our government. And I think if the intention was to remove the possibility of having bilateral conversations that I would not be in favor of this motion.
I can ask the corporate officer, I don't know if this is even in your realm, but would the motion as we have it in front of us mean that we cannot engage in community-to-community forums if the city if the city were not in agreement? Any thoughts?
I don't really have an opinion on that.
So, Director Elliott mentioned the intention of the motion. The intention of the motion, and my reading of the intention of the board at our May 3rd meeting, was to encourage participation of the two local governments, the regional district government and the city of Powell River government and the Tla'amin Nation, to find a way to get together and start the C3 meetings going. I expect that this would result in a discussion between the leaders of the boards, probably the CAOs of the three groups to begin with, to talk about a way to go. If roadblocks arose, I imagine we would hear from them. But the intention of this motion is not to limit participation or to limit what we can do. It's to open the doors and invite the Tla'amin Nation and the city to participate in community-to-community forums, which I think is a good thing. Hopefully everybody will sit down and find a way to do that, and we won't be excluding anybody.
Okay, thank you very much. I saw Director Gisborne, I believe.
Right.
And Director McCormick.
I'll hand it to Director McCormick first.
Thank you. And I think Director Paul had his hand up before me. I wanted to go first.
Who wants to go first then?
Okay, I'll be extremely brief, and I just wanted to say I support the rewording of the motion. I think it more or less says the same thing in terms of intent, but I like the idea of putting the phrase in collaboration up front, because I think it gets closer to what we were talking about, and I concur with the comments made by Director Doubt. Thank you.
Okay, Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. My issue is one of semantics. The board itself cannot reinstate anything, but I believe the wording should be, we support the reinstatement. So I would like to move an amendment, Chair, if that's possible, and that is to, perhaps we could see on our screens the motion that has been put forward. If we could, I would just like to change the word reinstate to support the reinstatement of. And if there's a seconder for the amendment, then I can speak further.
Great, Director Gisborne is seconding it. So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. It is, I support the intent.
Corporate officer, you got your hand up?
Yeah, sorry, just for clarification before we proceed to, are we talking about the motion that is in the staff report?
No, the motion that.
Okay, yes. Thank you.
Are we going to put it up so that we get?
I'm just working on that right now.
Okay, well, let's
Thank
let Director McCormick speak while the corporate officer gets the motion on the board for us.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I pretty much said it. I just think we ourselves don't have the authority to reinstate the meetings. That has to be done in cooperation and partnership with the two other local governments. So I just think the wording is more appropriate if we say support reinstatement rather than we will do something that we can't really do.
Okay, let's give the corporate officer a moment here.
I'm sorry, I've got to move this. While you guys are waiting, right? I think I could offer some additional information that might be helpful.
Okay.
Reinstatement of.
In collaboration with.
Thank you.
There you
go. The next host for C3, I know it's been quite a few years. Oh, thank you. Is Tla'amin Nation, and they have reached out.
Okay, so here we have the motion with the proposed amendment. It's coming up. Okay, so here we have the proposed amendment in front of us. Now I have Director Gisborne was the next to speak, and then I have Director Bout's hand was up as well.
Thank you, Chair.
We're speaking to the amended.
The amended motion or just the amendment?
The amended.
Amendment, because it hasn't been amended yet.
Right.
What
I
is
think
this?
we have an amendment on the floor, and I think the proper order of business is to discuss the amendment.
Yeah, which part of the motion on the screen was the amendment?
The amendment was the in collaboration. Oh, sorry. Support reinstatement.
Yeah, support reinstatement rather than reinstate.
Yes.
Okay, I'll hold my comments until we're back to the main motion.
Okay, Director Dowd, would you like to speak on the amendment?
Simply going to say that it only clarifies, the amendment only clarifies the motion, and I have no problem with it.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment? All opposed, none opposed, motion carries. So now we have the motion. And Director Gisborne.
Okay, main motion. I'm gonna try and articulate my thoughts. The motion before us is that we support reinstating the C3s. As I understand it, the C3s were never abolished. The board never made a decision to say we're not doing it anymore. The next order of governance that is responsible for hosting a C3 is Tla'amin Nation. We just heard that they have already sent out an invitation and contacted our staff. In my opinion, then, the motion is moot. We don't need it. We can do a C3. We don't need to pass a resolution to say we're going to go back to doing what we were doing before. That's my first point on the item before us. My second point is the statement of more than halfway, more than half the time. If we're just going to go back to doing what we were doing 2 years ago and we had issues, I don't know if that's going to actually make us go more than halfway, more than half the time. The issue at the heart of the challenges we've been having at our C3 meetings is how do we conduct our meetings? Regional districts, municipal councils operate under the community charter. And there's a transparency requirement for anytime there's progress made in the decision-making process. We come together at C3 to talk about issues that affect our community, affect regional district jurisdiction, respect municipal jurisdiction. The way I see that is we should have that open to the public because we're meeting. But the problem we've had is we would have a C3 and it was considered generally private. So we would come, we would discuss, and we didn't know whether or not there's a record of what was discussed. It's not being filmed. We kind of write up an agenda and we have different expectations when we walk into that room. I heard over the last term after a C3 meeting, different elected officials going and telling folks either in person or online saying, well, this is what was discussed at C3. That feeds the rumor mill. That's not how we should be having these conversations, because you get 3 people in a room, you get 4 different opinions. The transparency structure is important for regional districts and municipal councils. That's why my belief is that we either have a meeting, we have a record of it, and it's held in public, or if the assembly chooses, we go in camera, and then we are bound by secrecy of what's discussed in the confidential session. But going back to the way that we were having our C3s, which is semi-private, but not really, I think it's just going to feed the rumor mill. And I don't know if it'll necessarily build trust between all 3 of our organizations. My next point is that I talked to some elected officials in other parts of the province. Some of them actually include school districts in their C2 or C3 or C4. So I would, if we are gonna go and start having C3 meetings again, I would say let's have it open to the school district as well. They're the ones, you know, making decisions for our children and our next generation. So I don't see the point of this motion. And I still see the problems of what we were having with our C3 in the past, and I don't see this resolution going the next step. And my last point is that we should include the school district. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments, Director Dow.
Yeah, so I'm going to support this resolution, and I urge other people to do that. This is not a solution to everything, not solve all the world's problems. It's an effort to reach out to the Tla'amin Nation and to the city to try to get these forums going again. Realistically, that outreach will begin a discussion between the three groups to find a way to get together to operate the C3 in a way that is satisfactory to everybody. I've been told about objections at Tla'amin Nation. They haven't told me about them, but I've been told by staff members about what the staff members believe that the Tla'amin Nation would like to see to have a C3. I think they're totally capable of bringing up those discussions and those issues, and as are the representatives of the city and the regional district, and about how those take place and the rules for those meetings. Part 2 of this resolution talks to that. But I think if we keep adding complications and we keep adding hurdles to get over into the resolution, we will never get to the invitation to get back to the table. We'll never get an expression that we actually want to communicate. So that's why I think this motion that we've worked on for a long time, number 1 here, that's now modified slightly, is a good one. To reach out and get people together and talk about how we can have meetings together that work for everybody, protects everybody's interest.
Okay, thanks very much, Director McCormick, and then Director Elliott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This motion makes a statement about how we feel in relation to the C3 meetings. It doesn't address the format, which may or may not change down the road. That would be up to the whole group. But rather it just puts our position on the table. We would like to get back to talking, and so I definitely support this resolution. Thank you.
Okay, Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, fellow directors. I agree. We want to get back to talking. I support the motion if it's clear that we're not trying to restrict other options other than what's in the motion. Is it possible that we would have conversations bilaterally if that's where we land? I fully agree with my fellow directors in understanding the problem is how we've been having the meetings, and we don't have full agreement of all the parties on how to conduct those meetings. Having said that, we all want to meet. The people at the city want to meet, the people in Common want to meet, and the people here at the regional district want to meet. We've had some folks feel that the past way that we were meeting caused them harm, and I hate that idea. I don't want anyone to feel harmed as a result of our meetings. So we definitely need to get back to the table and discuss how we can move forward in collaboration and have good meetings with one another that are safe for everybody involved. We're not going to get there by staying within our own board and talking about it. So we definitely need to get there. So I'm in favor of starting those conversations. I think where we go with those conversations and how we negotiate the terms of how we conduct those meetings is something we all need to participate in. And one of those, it could be argued that how meetings are conducted are a form of a negotiation and might meet the criteria for being in camera. But I do agree with Director Gisborne is if something's to be in camera, it should be in camera, not halfway. So I understand that point and I appreciate it. So I will vote for the motion, even though I know the motion does not address all of our issues. And how we ended up here in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Director Gisborne, second time.
You'll have a second pick at the can. Really appreciate the conversation going around the table. I've been hearing the word meeting used frequently, that we're looking to meet with Common Nation and discuss on how we're going to move forward. The ombudsperson has, they've issued how we're supposed to be having meetings. Is the expectation, if this motion passes and we go back to having the C3 as it was, will the public be allowed to observe a material part of the discussion that's going on, or will this forum meeting be closed to the public and the press? That's my question, and maybe the staff can help.
Through the
Point
chair.
of order, Chair, I don't believe that question is relevant to the motion on the board, on the table. The motion says we support the reinstatement. It doesn't say anything about what that will look like. And I believe the question that's been asked is about what it will look like. So I don't believe that's in order.
I think I'm going to let the CAO speak on this one. He seems to have something relevant to say about it. I can understand Director Gisborne's concern about knowing what type of forum we are reinstating. But anyway, let's listen to what the CAO has to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Through the chair. That question, I think, will be answered once all three bodies get together.
Okay, so when we meet, then we'll determine whether or not the public can observe us meeting.
Through the chair, not to take it out of technical jargon and word for word literally, but what I'm saying is you guys will have to meet and hash it out as to how your future meetings will go from there forward. So that first get together most definitely will probably not be open to the public because there's going to be a lot of things said. And if I'm not mistaken, it was the executive council who made the invitation, and under Tla'amin bylaw, you can only enter into an executive council meeting by invitation.
Okay, I think that answers my question, that it won't be open to the public or meeting. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Director Dowd.
We're examining every word here. And a lot of what we're examining are words that aren't in the motion. The motion talks about C3 forums. Talks about an invitation to get all three groups together and talk about reinstating C3 forums. And I'd just like to leave it at that, get the motion passed, and then we can try to get together and see if everybody can agree on how we're going to get together. Because obviously there are going to be some rules about how we get together. That's going to be part of the discussion.
Yeah, and as the CAO said, we can hash that all out. So seeing no other further discussion, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? I guess not opposed. Motion carries. Director Dowd.
Number 2, and I'll just read the motion that's number 2 in the package, and it says that the Cassette Regional District write a letter to the Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation and the Minister of Municipal Affairs, urging that they amend text in the community charter to enable local governments to have private forums with First Nations. And if there's a seconder,
Second. Director Gisborne, second.
So I support this motion. Okay, I think we've asked the provincial government to do this before, and they haven't seemed too excited about getting their sleeves rolled up and doing it. They seem more interested in letting us lead the way and see what we come up with, and that's fair. But I think we should try this, and as a guide to what we're going to do in our discussion with the other groups, and looking at the discussion we had on May 3rd. There were a couple of issues that I brought up that I think need to be thought about. They don't need to be in the wording, but they need to be thought about. Is that the get-togethers, forums, meetings, whatever we want to call them, should, in my opinion, be generally open to the public have abilities like section 90 of the community charter to go into a closed meeting for a number of reasons, including particular reasons that Indigenous First Nations might have that other local governments don't. And with that background, I think that we should go ahead and try to do it. It's important to me that the public have as much involvement and as much access as they can to the discussion. But, under section 19 of the community charter, and maybe in additional ways that affect First Nations, there are reasons to have those meetings in an in-camera or a closed meeting, or even a private meeting situation, as long as we define those ahead of time. So I support number 2 of this resolution.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion? Director Gisborne.
Propose an amendment. Strike out the words private forums, replaced with closed meetings. If I get a seconder, I'll explain.
I get a seconder, Director Elliott.
I'll explain. The resolution says to enable local governments to have private forums with First Nations. Talking about changing the community charter. Community charter talks about meetings and closed sessions. It doesn't talk about private meetings, and it doesn't talk about closed forums. It is closed meetings in the legislation. So I don't know how private forums would fit in with the existing framework. I think asking for closed meetings, dealing with Indigenous and First Nations, it's more with what the provincial legislation is. So it's a reasonable ask.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm just going to ask the CAO. Yes, does that seems to make sense to me? But if I'm not seeing something there, I mean, closed meeting is definitely a common term. I don't know if private forum is a common term in the charter.
Through the chair, there are 2 distinct definitions, and private just means that nobody is allowed in. You have a private residence, you don't let your neighbors in unless they're invited. But once they're invited, they can go home and you can talk about the card game you had or whatever. When you're in camera in a closed session and you invite somebody in, they can't go back out and start talking about it anywhere. So there are 2 distinct definitions of what that means. One is definitely in the charter, which means you can't discuss confidentiality. And private does not mean confidentiality. It just means only a select few are invited in to participate. And without getting on any further, I believe the Tla'amin Nation supports that so that they can help to protect their farm from being disturbed any more than it has been, and help to protect them from any racial discrimination or anything else that can fall out of having an open meeting where the public gets a view of it and then rallies and puts their viewpoint or spin on things on social media and causes a stir, which then upsets the Tla'amin Nation and their people.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. So I guess the amendment is proposing to change it from private forums, which is one definition, to a closed meeting, which is entirely different definition. So if anybody would like to weigh in on the differences here, I'll have Director McCormick and then Director Dowd.
Thank you. So yeah, just trying to wrap my head around the difference between a private forum and a private closed meeting. A meeting would imply a decision-making body that is going to make decisions, and then those would be carried out. Whereas a private forum, to me, strikes me as more of a discussion, not necessarily a decision-making body. In fact, I don't take that as a decision-making body. So my question, Chair, is, I guess, to staff, am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah.
Through the chair, that would be part of it, yes.
Okay, so then our debate with the amendment is whether we support the word private forum in there, which is not a decision-making body, because the 3 of us don't make decisions anyway. We take them back to our own, board or council or legislature. But a closed meeting does then imply a decision-making body. So with that understanding, I'll say thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Director Doubt and then Director Leonard.
Again, I don't support the emotion. What we are asking the municipal, the provincial government to do is amend the text of the community charter. And we use some really simple words to enable local governments to have private forums with First Nations. Now, that is obviously not text that you would expect to see in the community charter. Community charter, when it is amended, is going to have new definitions, new descriptions of when those definitions apply, new procedures. There's a lot of complicated language to write there. This is not an attempt to define, in my view, all of the different things that could need to be defined to try to find a process and regulations and guidelines about how to operate forums and meetings and gatherings that may take place. It's a request to the provincial government to look at it, come up with amendments to the text of the community charter to make what we're trying to do possible. And there is a lot of opportunity in there, and debating one word or another at this point is a bit futile because we don't even know that they're willing to start that process.
Okay, thanks very much. Director Lennox.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I support what Director Doubt, his point he was making. And when I look at the guidelines here to community forums that's been provided by the provincial government, the wording is very consistent. So I think that the intent of our motion will be consistent with what the province has been telling us and guiding communities on this subject. And that if they, I think if they can get there to consider making the changes, then that terminology may be changed through that mechanism. So I'm prepared to support the original motion.
Okay, thank you. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for this conversation. I'm leaning toward supporting the original wording. I do think that something entirely different should be put forward by the province as far as what their intentions are for municipalities when dealing with First Nations, because reconciliation and government to government relationships is the bailiwick of the province. They should deal with whether they would support C3s going forward in the way that Indigenous governments are asking for them to be done or not. And currently our legislation is problematic in that area. So I think I'm going to vote against the amendment, and I like the original wording because it does put the ball back in the provincial court saying, hey, we're getting requests to do these other things. What, you either need to enable them or come out and have an actual position on this. You can't be hanging us out to dry like this. And so, yeah, I'm going to vote against the amendment.
Okay.
Yeah. I hear the comments around, the forum is not a decision-making body. That is correct. When we have a C3, we're not making a decision. On that same note, the regional district, the board makes decisions. We have committee of the whole, planning committee, finance committee. They don't actually make decisions either. They make recommendations for the board. But those committees are still bound by the community charter of open meetings or closed meetings. We don't get the option to have a private finance committee meeting. It's either open or it's closed. The way I see it is a key factor in determining whether a gathering constitutes a meeting and is therefore subject to open meeting requirements is the nature of the discussion. This depends on whether a gathering involves discussing matters within the local government's jurisdiction in a capacity that deprives the public of the opportunity to observe a material part of the decision-making process. Any real progress in the decision-making process of a matter within the local government's jurisdiction strongly indicates that a gathering is a meeting. This does not necessarily mean, however, that if progress towards a decision is not made at the meeting, that it is not a meeting. It may still be one if the meeting was for that purpose, even though the desired progress or results was not achieved. What I'm saying is we can get together and discuss things, but just because we don't pass a motion doesn't mean that we're not necessarily meeting or having the perception of a meeting. And I understand the CAO's comments about, private, it's my house, have a private discussion, but we are a public body and we can only have our meetings in public or closed. We don't really get to do the half in, half out. So that's the first one about this amendment. The second one was, there's these requests coming from First Nations communities about changing the Local Government Act to work and communicate with First Nations. My attitude, my stance would be, if a treated First Nation would like to put forward this request in writing, send it to the board, I would happily support it. But what we're doing is we're making the request to the province. We're taking the lead, but we don't represent Tla'amin Nation. So my proposal for this amendment is to allow the in-camera sessions to also include treated First Nations, just like it includes the province and the federal government. So I will still support this amendment. But if this amendment doesn't pass, I don't think I can support the main motion. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Nothing from the CAO. Okay, Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. And we've talked a lot about this, so I'll keep it very brief. We've identified a problem, and we're asking the province for some solution, which is to enable us to do something. I think we need to keep it general. I think we need to keep it as high as possible. We're not trying to say exactly how the province should address this. We're hoping they take the effort to try to address this and make some changes. So in that sense, I like the original wording. I think I understand the comments made by Director Gisborne, but they presuppose the outcome. And I think keeping it as general as possible, in my mind, is preferable. Thank you.
Okay, we've kicked this around quite a bit. Seeing no other hands up, I'm going to call the question on the amendment. So we are voting for the amendment. So anybody in favor of the amendment? Director Gisborne? Anybody opposed to the amendment? 6 opposed. It does not pass. We'll go back to the original motion. We've kicked this around quite a bit, but is there anybody else that still wants to speak to the original motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Director Gisborne opposed. Thank you very much. Oh, okay, so that's the first item off of the consent agenda. So 10.8. Shelter Point Concession. I believe Director McCormick took this one off the consent agenda. So go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I'm putting forward alternative wording for a motion. I believe our corporate officer has that wording. Perhaps she could post
pulling it up right now. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, that the board directs staff to close the Shelter Point Park concession for 2023, and that the board directs staff to seek the services of a food truck vendor for Shelter Point Park for 2023, and that any decision regarding decommissioning and repurposing the concession building be referred to the 2024 budget process.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Director Lennox. Okay, Director McCormick.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And the reason for the rewording is to really leave the door open for a multi-year contractor to come forward. I believe that there is interest in there in the community. And so delaying the decision regarding the repurposing isn't going to necessarily change anything that staff were planning. They were planning on doing the work anyway in 2024. But to find out if there is interest in the community, we could do our bidding process in January before the budget is done, so that if there were no takers, if there was no interest in the concession, we would then know that so that we could plan accordingly in the budget for the work plan for 2024. Now, the concession may not be paramount to the camping experience, but I would argue that it is an integral part of that experience. People come back to Shelter Point Park because of the concession. It's tradition. You cannot cook an ice cream cone on a camp stove. The concession has a very vital role to play. I want to leave the door open because although costs are down, less than half of what they were in 2018, a low rent also does not imply any hardship or upsetting any other food suppliers. There are no other food suppliers in that part of the island. And we're only talking about a couple months in the summer, and businesses are well used to the concession being open. The concession building itself is less than 10 years old. The old concession building burnt down in a fire that also burnt down the caretaker's residence Labor Day weekend of 2012. And because the park is basically a midden, it took several years to get the archaeological permits required so that the concession and the caretaker's residence could be rebuilt. Now that has since taken place, but in the concession building, we put in a commercial kitchen, which are not cheap to put in, not cheap to throw away. And one former operator of the concession estimated to me that it would cost $40,000 minimum to replace what's already there in the building. That would be thrown away if we repurpose the building. And while I support going for a food truck for this summer, I have to say that I'm very skeptical. There were two very popular food trucks last year that located all around the island at different events, both of which have left Texada. So will there be any takers on the food truck? Gee, I don't know. When I look at the budget that I appreciate receiving from staff, so thank you very much for that, I note that the camper fees for 2022 are $10,000 above what was budgeted. So the actual turned out to be $10,000 more. So I believe that there is enough resources in the camper fees alone to offset the cost of the concession. Do the pay showers make money given the high cost of bringing water to the park to serve them, to make them operate? No, but they're part of that camp experience at Shelter Point. And I believe the benefits of having a concession far outweigh the cost. So in closing, I guess I'm asking directors to approve this motion, to leave the door open for a few more months to see what comes forward, because decades of having a viable concession at the park can't be just thrown away without due consideration. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other directors want to comment?
Let's see the motion again.
Bring the motion up.
The new motion. Okay.
Here we are.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I prefer the original motion, and I realize that the previous year's provider, although they point out that there was no way they would bid on doing the job this year, they would like to maybe think about doing it in the future, reported that from their perspective, they had made a profit. That's not that the regional district made a profit or that the regional district broke even. We have the financial reports from the regional district that shows that the parks budget has been paying a significant amount of money every year to keep that that concession going. It's been a cost to the park service every year, and it continues to be, and it's forecast to be a cost in the future. And all the reports saying that this is the only place that the park service provides a subsidy to have the food service in the park. And I think if we're going to consider that, we should be thinking about doing that in all of the regional parks. And I think a more consistent process is to look to food truck providers who are mobile and can do the job in a flexible way. they don't have to show up on the rainy days when they don't expect to be selling any food. They can take the truck somewhere else. So I prefer the original motion myself.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other?
Thank you. I support Director McCormick's motion. I don't think we're talking about all parks. I think we're talking about a traditional and historical feature of Shelter Point Park on Texada Island. And I think if there are other remote island parks that want to have custom solutions to their island, the regional district should consider those as well. And I don't think they all have to look the same, and I don't think the services need to necessarily be structured the same. I think Director McCormick is asking for an opportunity for a multi-year contract to be negotiated over the next little while, starting in 2024. I think I heard a delegation saying that they might be interested in that, fairly strongly so. I think that I support the motion just to give that opportunity a try. Thank you.
Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this one has me scratching my noggin a bit. Recalling from the peak article from the previous discussion, it was according to Devereaux's report, the concession is operated at a considerable loss, totaling a net cost for the regional district of $17,308 from 2018 to 2022. I believe that's what Director Dowd is referring to about how it costs to all regional parks. It's, yes, regional districts operate siloed services, but our individual parks are not siloed. They are lumped into the same budget. So Shelter Point, Haywire Bay, even the Paradise Exhibition Park are all part of that same parks budget. So what we do with Shelter Point does have an impact on the budget for all parks. The other part that I have a bit of a challenge with is at our previous meeting, we heard that the staff had conversations with operators over the past few years, and the concession does not operate at a profit because there's not enough consistent business over the summer. Well, today we had a delegation saying that the concession is profitable, but then that also makes me wonder, well, then why don't we get any bidders? But that's outside my wheelhouse. I guess my one holdover with the motion before us is that we will consider Shelter Point Park at the next budget session. But I hear we are working through the process of regional parks and trails plan to kind of come up with a consistent plan for our parks and our trails. And when we get that report before us, hopefully it'll be before our budget period. Maybe that would be the time to really look into, well, are we having food trucks? Are we operating concession stands in not just Shelter Point, but other regional parks as well? So I'm not saying I'm in favor or opposed to the motion. I get the intent, but I'm just wondering if maybe rather than holding off a decision or any decision, which is what the motion says, is we won't consider it until the budget, that we should also consider it when we get that Parks and Trails plan, which is coming down the pipe. Would our staff or CIO know when that would, where that fits in the timeline, that parks and...
Yeah. Unfortunately, unfortunately, I don't know when that is going to occur.
Okay. Oh, I see our planner.
Oh, Ms. Dykstra.
Thank you through the chair. Yeah, that's correct. We have presented a draft strategy to the community. We have a survey available that the public is filling out now, and we expect the consultants to close that in, I believe it's on the 30th of this month. So then there's going to be some data collection and analysis from that. So there should hopefully be a report back to the board midsummer.
Thank you very much. Director Fowler, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm inclined to support the motion put forth by Director McCormick for a couple of reasons. It separates the issue into two pieces, and we've talked a lot about this at the committee of the whole. We've talked a lot about it, or was it the finance? I can't remember. And now we're talking about it again here. it serves to meet the needs this year, which is more or less what the motion in the agenda says. You know, it's the same as effect for 2023, a food truck, keeping it shut down. When at the meeting, when we talked about this at the committee meeting, our manager of operational services, Mr. Devereaux, in response to a question from myself about decommissioning, he basically said that it gets shut down every winter and kind of locked up. So there's no real cost associated with just shutting it down. There is costs, as Director McCormick has identified, with actually taking out the equipment and repurposing it. So that's the separate part. So it allows 2023 to be the same as in the motion and the agenda, but it defers and postpones the decision on the repurposing and any changes to it. It doesn't take that off the table. I do, you know, understand the comments about, you know, similar services and the budget issues. That is something we can and should talk about at the appropriate time, and it doesn't have to be right now. I also think the previous board decided to put that building there at substantial cost. So I don't want to second guess a previous board deciding that a concession was the appropriate thing. If we were talking about a new concession, that'd be a completely different story. But the building's there, it met all the needs and the studies and everything that have been raised. And I don't think now is the time to talk about that. But I do think, we can put this off. We can talk about it a bit more. And I'd also like to point out, and what influences me somewhat, is that when we had this on the committee agenda, Director McCormick wasn't there to help us get some of the information that she has put forward. So I think separating that out, dealing with what we need to do in 2023 and deferring discussions until a later time, especially during budget time next year, seems entirely appropriate to me. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. Seeing no other hands up.
Can I see the motion again?
Sure, bring the motion up.
Director McCormick has her hand.
I intend to, I listened to what everybody had to say around the table here and took it all into consideration. And I see this motion is basically an opportunity to just kick it down the road, as a popular saying, I guess, and see how things go this year with a food truck. So I'll be supporting the motion in front of us, and then budget time, we can look at it more closely and see how it aligns with future years. We got the budget, the motion in front of us. There's no other discussion. I'll call it
Director McCormick.
Oh, sorry, Director McCormick.
Well, thank you. Just sort of to address a couple of points that were raised. $17,000 was quoted as a cost, divided by the 6 years is $2,800 per year. When you look at the $10,000 that we took in over and above what was expected in the way of camper fees, it seems to me that this is a drop in the bucket. Also, the other comment I wanted to make regarding the Parks and Trails strategy that is being developed, that's a high-level document. That's going to talk about, principles and directions. It's not going to get into specific detail regarding the operation of one particular park. So I don't know that the two are actually relevant, but just in closing to say that I think it makes sense to postpone the decision. For one thing, if the bidding process does take place in January, we will have a lot more information upon which to make an informed decision, which doesn't impede in any way what staff were planning to do anyway. So thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
I'd like to move that the motion be split. The first two separated from the last section.
Corporate officer, no problems with that?
No.
Okay, so we have 3 motions then.
Two. Thank you.
We got, yeah.
So if I may, Chair.
Yes.
So there's mover, seconder, discussion remains the same on all of them. So there's mover and seconder for all the motions. So you would just now.
Yeah, so we have 3 motions though.
Oh,
correct.
2 motions. We're going to split here.
Oh, just
period after 2023. I should share this so everybody can
okay.
Yes, could you share it, please?
Yes. So I'm going to share, and hopefully my mouse actually shares as well, but it doesn't, but my understanding is we're going to put a period after the second 2023. I see no mouse. Oh, good. Okay. And that will be the first motion that is voted on.
Okay, so we're voting that the board directs staff to close the Shelter Point Park concession for 2023 and that the board directs staff to seek the services of a food truck vendor for Shelter Point Park for 2023.
Yes.
So, all right, on the question, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Moving on to the second one. That any decision regarding decommissioning and repurposing the concession building be referred to the 2024 budget process. Do I have somebody making the motion? Oh, that's removed and seconded, right? So discussion.
Discussion's already occurred.
So it's just a vote. Okay.
Well, we can still have discussion though, right? Or is it?
So the rules of debate. So you can't extend. Splitting the question doesn't extend debate. I guess I should say it that way. So if you've used your time to speak, it doesn't give more time.
It's up to the chair, my understanding.
Was that? Yeah, I'm just gonna call the question because we have had a lot of discussion on this and you've had 2 chances to speak on this one already. So all in favor? Any opposed? Director Gisborne opposed. Okay. Item number 3 from the consent agenda was 10.3. Draft amending bylaws for Catholic Regional District's electoral area A, B, C official community plans. Director Gisborne, I believe you pulled this.
Yes. Mainly number 2, area B, OCG, the one that I would like to speak to. So
we should just go ahead with the first motion then, I guess, as written.
Sure.
Okay, would somebody like to move that one? Lennox, thank you. Seconded by Director McCormick, thank you. Any discussion?
The changes for area A OCP. I'll follow the leadership of area A. One of the reasons why we have OCPs for each individual area rather than a harmonized OCP is because each electoral area is different. So if area A is comfortable with the proposed changes, then I'll support the director from area A.
Any other discussion? None, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. I should have mentioned this is areas A, B, C, and D unweighted vote. So moving on to number 2.
I'm not sure if I'm going to vote against it or in favor of it, but would you like to move it?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I can move.
Okay, moved by Director Lennox, seconded by Director Director Gisborne.
Yeah.
And any discussion, Director Gisborne?
Yeah, this is what I'm still rattling my brain about. The Area B official community plan for properties designated as rural residential states as a policy, a rural area is one in which the natural environment takes precedent over the built environment. I recall in 2021, a motion was brought before the Assembly regarding a development in Area B on Paget Road. The concern from community members and from members of the board was that they were putting in more dwellings than what was allowed in the official community plan. Rural residential currently allows 1 dwelling for every 2 hectares are allowed on properties designated rural residential. I think there's also a clause for a secondary dwelling in there. So if you've got a 10-hectare property, that's 5 principal dwellings currently, with potentially another 5 for the secondary. I recall the controversy was that they were looking at having more than 20. The proposed amendment in the Area B OCP bylaw would read, and this is for rural residential, a residential dwelling is permitted on all land designated rural residential. The maximum number of dwellings or serviced buildings per parcel is based on proof of water and sewer servicing that meets provincial standards. So if it was a controversy 2 years ago to have 20 dwellings, and you could have 10 under the current OCP, if this change goes forward, how many dwellings would be allowed on rural residential? Because the way I read this is it's up to the provincial standards. So is the regional district saying, as long as you meet healthcare requirements, you can have as many as you want? Is that my understanding?
I would like to turn that over to Ms. Dykstra from the planning department. If she has a comment on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Yeah, Director Gisborne is highlighting the fact that the regional district in the official community plan would support density that is approved through Vancouver Coastal Health. At this time, it does match every 5 acres for on-site sewer and water. So it translates to be the exact same. We're just making the language more consistent across electoral areas A, B, and C to default to the proof of water and sewer servicing for provincial standards.
Okay, thank you very much. Yep.
Yeah, this is where I get really confused because we have developments in Area B where there's more than one dwelling for 5 hectares, and it's been approved by the Ministry of Health. The size of, the number of dwellings for a septic field, my understanding is it's sized in the number of bedrooms. If you've got a septic field where you can have a 10-bedroom house, if you want to switch over to having, 10 small dwellings, as I understand it, the Ministry of Health allows it. My farm alone has 4 septic fields on 18 acres. It's ALR, so that's a different story. The issue I have then with this proposed change is that original policy that is in the official community plan that says a rural area is one in which the natural environment takes precedent over the built environment. And we are now putting forward a proposal that a property owner on rural residential or low density residential can have as many dwellings as they want as long as they meet the provincial health requirements. And then that just makes me wonder, well, then what does low density mean in relation to low density residential? Because you can have as much density as you want, as long as you meet provincial health requirements. And I don't want to pick out any property, but I can go down a list of properties where they've got quite heavy development on it, and they're meeting the Ministry of Health water and sewer requirements. So I don't know if I can support this, because how do we, in our official community plan then, say that we support precedents of the natural environment over the built environment?
Okay. Any other comments? Ms. Dykstra, I see your hand up.
Thank you, through the chair. I do believe the director is making some good points, and I just want to highlight the third motion that's before the board regarding hosting public information meetings. And staff is committed to hosting those public information meetings and gathering the feedback, important feedback about servicing and about the rural character in Area B. So I just wanted to highlight that for the board, that after the presentation of the bylaw readings this afternoon, that staff would still be going ahead with a number of public information meetings to gather feedback. And the proposed amending bylaws may change to reflect the feedback we receive from the community.
Good. Thanks very much. Seeing no other hands up, I'll call a question. All in favor? Any opposed? Director Gisborne opposed. Motion carries. Number 3. I'll move it. Seconded by Director Leonard. Thank you. Any discussion? Director Gisborne.
I will support the director whose official community plan this relates to. And in this case, this is Director Brander. So whatever way you want to go, I'll support you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Okay. Welcome back, Directors Stout and Elliott. It's fun.
And Paul.
Well, I mean, he's not at the table, but yes. Resolutions, growing communities fund allocation to the Resource Recovery Center borrowing costs. I'll move it. Seconded by Director Gisborne. Thank you very much. As I said during the this is with Finance Committee. I'm very much in support of this. I see this as a windfall. We were given this growing communities funding by the government. We didn't expect it. It wasn't included in our budget. And I think there are many benefits to reducing the amount of borrowing for the next 30 years. And 30 years is an awfully long time. So if we can reduce that debt by anything, we're going to be reducing the amount of money that people, taxpayers for the next 30 years will be paying. And the concept of just putting more burden on the shoulders of those that come after us, if we have an opportunity to lessen that, I think we need to take it. And this is just opening up an invitation to the municipality to see if they want to join us on this. So it hasn't been no final decisions are being made. It is just, you know, kind of extending and not an olive branch, I guess, but just an opportunity. Any other discussion? Director, yes, board.
Thank you. I support this motion, and I would highly encourage that the municipal councillors consider the offer. One of the big reasons is the municipality is part of the regional district. The cost for the Resource Recovery Center and the solid waste management service is paid for by everyone. If we can collaborate to use our grant funding to reduce the debt, the way I see that as we pay more now so that we pay less later. If we decide to say, no, we're not going to share our grant funding, then what that means is we don't pay as much now, but we collectively, city and electoral areas, will pay more later. And for those residents of the city that think, well, maybe we can negotiate how much they pay. Essentially, as I understand it, and Ms. Greenan can correct me, the regional district figures out the budget, we adopt the budget, and then we end the bill to the city. So if we can drop the long-term debt, then the city's long-term billing will go down. That's how I see it. And if I was on the other side of the aisle, which I am not, I'm on the other side of the boundary, I would support the resolution. But this is, I think, a starting point. And I think that we should just at least have the discussion. Maybe it's something for our C3 meeting where we can all come together and figure out what we want to do. Thank you.
Director Dowd.
Yeah. So first off is, as I said at the Finance Committee, I'm opposed to this resolution. The taxpayers in the city of Powell River pay taxes twice. They pay one tax to the city of Powell River, and they are assessed by the Cassette Regional District another tax for regional services. The regional services that the Cassette Regional District allocates to city taxpayers is the city's fair share, including the Resource Recovery Center. That there's a significant increase in this year's assessment from the regional district, and most of that significant increase is resulting from borrowing for the Resource Recovery Center, which through the regional service is equally distributed to all of the people who participate in that Resource Recovery Center service, which is fair. What this motion asks is that after having paid the one tax for the Resource Recovery Center, we send a letter to the city of Powell River, not those taxpayers who are paying to the regional district. We send a letter to the city of Powell River saying, we would like you to divert your resources to reducing the debt of the regional district, which is the benefit of that reduction in debt would then be split among all the people who participate in the regional district service, which would actually reduce the debt reduction to the city that the city of Powell River gets from that windfall that we got from the provincial government. So I'm saying that this letter actually asks that city taxpayers who pay taxes directly to the regional district pay that way, and then they also pay again in city taxes that are not part of the regional district service. So I'm opposed to this. If this actually had a commitment that it originally had to spend some money of the Catholic Regional District's money, it would be a weighted vote. It would be a different vote we were facing today than we otherwise are, but here we are. It's a request to the city of Powell River. I won't be supporting it here, and I won't be supporting the request at a municipal meeting either.
Thank you, Chair. I know that the city of Powell River has a lot of priorities for that fund. I understand the request and why it seems like a great idea. And it's not a terrible idea. It's just not going to be a priority of mine when I'm looking at all of the competing funds over at the city. We have incredible pressure to contribute to projects that include housing, paving, upgrades to deteriorating city waterworks, pipes, etc. So the funding for this particular project has been identified, approved, and gone through. That will make it less important on my scale of importance when considering funds at the other end. So I don't support the motion because I'm not going to make it a priority when that letter reaches the city of Powell River. And so I would like my vote to reflect my end goal is that we prioritize the city's money where they're going to do the most good for the city. And that isn't here. So, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna make a second comment. As has been identified, this is a regional service and everybody pays into it equally. So any debt incurred because of the Resource Recovery Center is regional debt, is municipal debt. It's everybody is carrying it. So the original numbers that I proposed actually were suggesting that the electoral areas that the regional district give a greater than 1-to-1 amount than was being asked of the municipality. So the debt, the using the Growing Communities Fund towards the reducing the loan to the Resource Recovery Center would actually go further than if paying off just a debt or reducing the borrowing for a municipal project. So I see it as an opportunity. I don't see it as downloading or double dipping into the city. The debt is not, well, like I said, regional debt is municipal debt. It's all the same in this case. So I really see it as an opportunity here. Now, did you had a hand up?
He had his hand up first.
Okay, Director.
I respectfully have to disagree with the chair. Regional district debt and municipal debt of the city of Powell River are distinct and separate things. They are not one and the same. They are not owed by a common borrower. Regional district debt is regional district debt that has to be paid by people who submit taxes to the regional district. City debt is debt of the city of Powell River. They are distinct and separate.
I was wondering if I might get some clarification from Ms. Greenan as to how we could kind of look at this borrowing. There's some confusion. Ms. Greenan.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. I think it's, I think what Director Doubt is referring to is that the city, when the city takes on debt, that's borne by just the city taxpayers, the taxpayers within the city boundary, whereas when we take on the debt, that's borne by the whole region. So, so our debt really only has about a 53% impact on the city taxpayers, whereas the city's debt has a 100% impact on the city's taxpayers. And then I guess the other part of it is that the regional district using that fund for a regional service gives the city taxpayers also a 53% benefit of us using those funds for a regional service as opposed to a rural service.
Okay, thank you. Director Gisborne, you had one more comment?
Yeah, I got a couple of things to say. One of the things I want to say is when we are at this table, we are regional directors and we are wearing our regional director hat. And it's something I've talked to other folks about, that when a municipal councillor is at the regional district table, they are expected to be acting in the best interest of the regional district. I understand that you also wear the second hat of being a municipal councillor. The second issue I heard was, well, the regional district assessing, the city's property. The regional district doesn't assess the city's property values. The PC assessment. We come up with a budget and we pass it. The Resource Recovery Center is a significant expense, and it's something that was decided on by this board multiple terms ago. Director Dowd also spoke about the weighted vote. Well, that's how the Resource Recovery Center got going in the first place. It was a weighted vote because it's a financial decision. And to remind everyone, that's a 7 out of 13. So if the municipal councillors didn't like the Resource Recovery Center, then it wouldn't have gone forward, but we are going forward with it. The next point is the regional district hands the bill to the municipality. The municipality then adds that to the tax bill of its citizens. They're not paying twice. Because using that same analogy, I live in the rural electoral area. The province is who I pay my property tax to. And they charge me for school district and roads and regional district. So I don't see it as I'm paying multiple times. I'm paying the province, and the province hands my money to the regional district. Fortunately, I'm on ALR, so it's not much. This item is simply asking the city, do they want to get involved with helping make it so that in the future, the regional district's bill to the city will be less. That's what this motion is asking for. And on the last point about the debt, I actually agree with Director Brander. The city's debt and the regional district's debt are actually quite similar, because the Municipal Finance Authority doesn't loan money to the city of Powell River. They loan money to the regional district, and we loan the money to the municipality. So the municipality's long-term debt is the regional district's debt. If the municipality ever couldn't pay, it's then borne by the whole region. That's why it comes before the board. I don't think any municipality has ever failed to pay, but that's just the structure. I think we're getting kind of off topic or off track. The motion is simply ask the city of Powell River, requesting that they consider partnering. We haven't put forward a dollar amount. We haven't put forward any specifics. We're just saying, would you consider working with us? That's the motion. I think that's in the best interest of the regional district, and I would encourage all directors to support it. Thank you, Chair.
Very much. Director Elliott, second.
Thank you, Chair. And just for the record, I always have my regional district hat on when I'm here. My area that I represent is the taxpayers of the city of Powell River here at the regional district. And what I've been trying to express is not that I don't appreciate that this is an offer to share funding from your grant to lower debt that would benefit everybody. I'm not arguing that. What I've been saying before and continue to say now is, unfortunately, that isn't the priority place for the taxpayers of our area, whether it be regional district or the city, for these funds. We have too many places to put this money that are at a higher priority than lowering this particular borrowing cost at this time. And so I am not in favor for my city taxpayers of this motion.
I'm just going to say one last thing before we, McCormick wants to go. I'm going to make a comment. I think should this letter, we're just debating the motion to send a letter.
Mhm.
And whether this is of a priority for the city taxpayers, I think you as city directors will get an opportunity to debate that at a different table. So it's not really an issue here. Director McCormick.
Yeah, I think it never hurts to ask, you know, if they're gonna say no, they're gonna say no. But as a regional board, it makes sense to ask the question. We're certainly no worse off if they say no. So I support the recommendation.
Great, thank you, Director Dell. Last chance, this is the third time around, I believe, so.
Yeah, and I just keep, new things just keep coming up that I have to respond to. So, I agree, and I think Councilor Elliott said it quite clearly. That all of the directors around the regional district represent people who pay taxes to the regional district. Councilor Elliott and I are sitting on this board not to represent the city of Powell River. That's not our job. We are here representing the some 13,000 citizens of the city of Powell River who pay taxes to their electoral area, which is the municipality pays taxes to the regional district. That's what I'm speaking about. I'm speaking about the best interest of those regional district taxpayers. And I believe Councilor Elliott is talking about the same thing.
Okay, great. We've gone around a lot. Let's vote on it. And then we'll be done with it. Move on. All in favor? Any opposed? Directors Elliott and Dowd opposed. Motion carries. Moving on to reports. 13.1 Provincial Referral for a Mines Act Permit Notice of Work for Mineral Exploration District Lot 14, Texada Island. Director McCormick, you're moving it. Thank you. Seconded by Director Lennox. Any discussion? Director McCormick.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely worth supporting. The fact that it's in the Venanda Watershed isn't even mentioned in the motion. So I have a quick question, Chair, to staff regarding the motion before us. Is it not significant to mention that the site is in the watershed as part of that motion? That's my question.
I mean, I think all that information is in the report, but I'll have Ms. Dykstra give her take on it.
Thank you through the chair. The language about the watershed is captured within the first strongly objects due to inconsistency with that regional district's official community plan bylaw. The watershed is identified in the Texada Island official community plan bylaw, and that's why staff did not go the extra mile to include the watershed in that motion.
Thank you. Follow up, Director McCormick?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, that makes sense. So, okay, so it's just that it's included. It just, I don't know, seemed to me significant because where it says inconsistency with the OCP, I might put in the section about the watershed, but you know what? I support the recommendation. So thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. And this is for directors A, B, C, and D, unweighted. Any other discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? None opposed, motion carries. 13.2. Opening it up again to all directors. One community center loan authorization bylaw number 564/2020, assent vote results and ballot account report. We have a mover for the first motion, Director Lennox, seconded by Director Elliott. Any discussion? Director Lennox.
Yeah, obviously, there's been a lot of work that's gone into where we are now, and I hope that everybody is ready to move with me on this to get it done. And I did want to mention, because I didn't say it in my director's report, but this is the staff. The entire community club wanted me to extend their appreciation for the ton of hard work that's gone into years of effort to get where we are now. So I specifically said that I would say that to the group because it's a true statement. So well done.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. On to item number 2, do we have a mover? Director Lennox again, thank you. Director Elliott, any discussion? Okay, ditto. Seeing none, all in favor? Again, none opposed, motion carries. Bylaws, Catholic Regional District Security Issuing Bylaw number 588, 2023. Do we have somebody who would like to read that out? Elliott.
I move that the board give first and second reading of Catholic Regional District Security Issuing Bylaw number 588, 2023.
Second by Director Gisborne. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries.
Sorry, Miss Man. I'm in favor.
I know you're.
I move that the board give the reading of Catholic Regional District Security Issuing Bylaw number 588, 2023.
Gisborne.
Third reading, sorry.
There you go. You got it in there. Any discussion? None. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carried. Elliott.
Try this reading thing.
Sure.
I move that the board adopt Catholic Regional District Security Issuing Bylaw number 588, 2023.
Director Gisborne seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. 14.2 Land Community Center Loan Authorization Bylaw number 564, 2020. Would like to read that out?
Yes, I move that the board adopt the Lund Community Center Loan Authorization number 564, 2020. It's been that long.
Gisborne seconds. Any discussion? Director McCormick? No, okay. No discussion. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. 14.3 Electoral Area A OCP Amendment Bylaw number 500.1, 2023. Director Lennox.
I move that the board give first and second reading of Electoral Area A Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 500.1, 2023.
Seconded by Director Gisborne. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carried. That was ABCD, as is the next one. Electoral Area B Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 465.9, 2023. We have a mover, Director Lennox. Second. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I move that the board give first and second reading of Electoral Area B Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 465.9, 2023.
Seconded by Director Gisborne. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Director Gisborne.
Yep. Area B is situated right next to the city of Powell River. It always has significant development pressure. And with this proposed change to go to allow essentially as many dwellings as people want, as long as they're consistent with Ministry of Health requirements, makes me very nervous. And in the last two elections, one of the big conversations with members of the public is how do we, protect our rural way of life outside the city limits? And if we're going to make the change to say you can have as many dwellings as you want, that makes me very nervous, not just for the unzoned areas, but also makes me nervous for the future of our currently zoned areas up on Nootka, Treff, and the Myrtle Pond water system. So I am not going to support this amendment bylaw. I think it's missing something which would allow us to kind of regulate footprint or lot size coverage. So that way we can ensure that there is a policy that has precedent of the natural environment over the built environment. Because with this change, you have a big apartment building going in next to you as long as you got the approved water and septic from Ministry of Health. And I know at least one property out in the rural area where they've got a well and their septic system is essentially a holding tank that they use to pump out, and they don't even need a field. And that's apparently okay with Ministry of Health. So I do not support this proposed change. I think it's missing a piece to ensure that people still live in a rural area.
Thanks very much for your comments. Director McCormick, I saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You know what? Density is coming, whether we like it or not. We can put up draw up the drawbridge and say no one else is going to come here. We'll protect our rural lifestyle forever. And that's the end of it. But you know what? That's not going to happen. This area is going to grow, maybe not as quickly as some other areas. And that's a good thing. But grow it will. And the pressure on our resources to accommodate that density increase are going to be huge. They're just starting. We're just starting to feel the effects of the spill out from the Lower Mainland. You know what? It would be great to say, we don't want any more housing here. No one else can come to this area because we're full. But we all have a share. We all have a part to play in this. Even the islands have a part to play in this. And so I support the recommendation, and I think it's the right way to go. Texada has always taken the position that there is no regulation regarding this. And so it's great to see the people on the mainland are catching up to us. So I support this. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to make the comment that this isn't adoption. There will be a public hearing session, so there are opportunities for the public to be heard. And going back to Director Gisborne.
Yeah, totally hear you. You know, density is a good thing. It's coming. But what is density? Is density the number of 5,000 square foot houses, 2,000 square foot houses? The way the OCP is written is a dwelling unit is a dwelling unit, and you can have as many as you want. Whether that's a tiny 600 square foot house or a 5,000 square foot house, no distinction in the OCP. One of the goals of our regional district and our community is sustainable development. We have seen the environmental disaster from urban sprawl. One of the reasons why ALR was created was so that the Lower Mainland would stop developing farmland. Rural residential land in the rural area is not ALR, but agriculture is considered an acceptable use on rural residential. You can farm on land that's not ALR. The solution to our housing crisis shouldn't be to sprawl, to develop our natural resources, to push out the natural environment. How many urban bears are just a problem in this community? The amount of bears that are losing habitat in just our community, and how many bears have actually been killed in the last month in the heat. Like it would shock the people in this room if I told you just how many of them.
I think we're getting off topic a little bit, so if you can bring it back in.
It's the natural environment, Chair. The electoral areas are not the urban centers. The ALR is not the place where we're going to solve our housing crisis. And pushing more development out into the rural area isn't the way to solve our housing crisis. This is a big change that's being proposed. I think Area B has the biggest challenge because we're right next to the city. Texada is a different story. That's why they have their own OCP. And whatever Texada and the Area B director want, I will support. But as the director of Area B and the challenges that Area B face, I don't support this proposal because it doesn't come with anything else to prioritize natural environment. And I'm not saying, okay, we should only have one dwelling per hectare. No, I like the idea of having as many dwellings as you want, but I also don't think we should just throw the barn door open and say you can essentially cover your property. That's not the goal either. I think a way more progressive approach is to pursue lot size coverage and floor area ratios. That's what the motion was that I brought forward in January. It was discussed in February, and the consensus around the table was, well, it's going to be in the staff report that's coming forward. It's not in the staff report. It's not in the bylaw. It's not even going to be presented to the public. So I don't support it. Thank you, Chair.
Director Elliott.
Thank you. I have no vote on this sake because I'm not one of the area directors. But I did want to say that urban sprawl is not a desired thing. And a more common sense way to go if we're contributing to some density in the regional districts would be to identify areas where that's appropriate because you think environmentally it would make sense. To assume that appropriate development will happen everywhere is dangerous.
And I actually agree with Director Gisborne and the points he's making. I don't get a vote, but I just thought I'd lend my voice to that point, I guess.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other hands up, we'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? 2 opposed, motion doesn't carry. Moving on to 14.5. I'll move that the board give first and second reading of Electoral Area C OCP Amendment Bylaw number 467.4 2023. Second by Director Lennox. Any discussion?
Whatever the Director of Area C wishes, I'll support.
All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Moving on to new business, 15.1. UBCM Resolution RE First Nation Inclusion and Community Charter Section 90. For mover, Director Elliott, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seconder by Director Fall, seconded. Now.
Thank you. So I worked with our corporate officer to come up with the wording, and essentially we're asking the provincial government to amend the community charter to treat First Nation governments on par with other governments within our legislation, because currently the legislation does not recognize First Nations as a government and marginalizes First Nations within that legislation piece. So I open the floor to comments from other directors and hope that they support this resolution.
Director Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy that this came forward, and the wording looks fine to me. Of course, at UBCM, the focus is on the therefore part of the clause. I mean, the whereas part is important, and this is a kind of offering forward for support from UBCM, a very specific change, but something that the province can do very easily. This came up at AVICC. It's actually it's not, this is unlike the letter that we're writing, which is a broad request to really look at the whole issue. This is really just adding 2 words, adding the words First Nation to the list of governments that are exempted or that are included, in the appropriate section 90. So I think it's a completely appropriate. I really hope, and I think I'm confident that UBCM will support this, and that would really give strong motivation for the province to do it, and it wouldn't take a lot of work for the province. They could put this through with a pretty minor amount of work.
Great. Thank you very much, Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I like this motion. It's kind of exactly what I was talking about half an hour ago. So I will wholeheartedly support it. Thank you.
Great. Any other discussion? Director Dowd.
I think I appreciate what the motion is trying to get at, but I have a problem with it. Firstly, the regional district and municipal governments are children of the provincial government. We are created and regulated by the provincial government in all things. They can direct, the provincial government can direct us what to do and what not to do. Treaty First Nations are distinctly different. They're not creatures of the provincial government. They cannot be regulated by the provincial government. They have a relationship with the Crown and the federal government, which is basic. My first concern, I know Treaty First Nations are welcome to be members of the UBCM. They are also welcome to become members of the regional district, and the Willamette Nation could be a member of this regional district. And those are good things. I think if there's going to be an inclusion in the community charter and the local government act that sets up rules for First Nations, that the people that are involved in that should be the First Nations themselves. I have a problem with a regional district, which is, I look around the table and I don't see that we have an authority to speak on behalf of this Willamette Nation and speak for what we think regulation should be on their level of government. If they wanted to make this motion, if there was a representative of the Willamette Nation here asking us for support for that motion, I'd be all in. But I have a real problem with the regional district saying, this is how we would like the province to regulate First Nations governments. I don't think we should be doing it. And I think it could create more problems than it solves.
Okay, see Director Elliott wants to speak. I'm just gonna make a comment that I don't see this as regulating First Nations, or in our specific case, Tla'amin Nation. It's a regulation that is upon this body. So I don't see that as much of a conflict. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So this legislation does not regulate First Nations, and changing the clause to include First Nations as being recognized as a level of government, it does not regulate First Nations. This clause regulates municipalities and how we do our governance, and it recognizes the federal government as a level of government and does not try to regulate them. So I don't believe that including First Nations and recognizing them as a level of government is an attempt to regulate them in any way. What it does allow is for the municipal governments who are children of the province to treat First Nations as a level of government by the legislation that they are governed by. So it's to give us the ability to do what we've been trying to do, which is recognize them as a level of government, have appropriate reconciliation measures, including the ability to treat them like a level of government, because our legislation doesn't prevent it. So I respectfully disagree with the idea that this somehow is trying to regulate other levels of government, because it isn't. Thanks.
Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I tend to agree with Director Elliott. This motion opens the door to bringing First Nations governments to the table. Whether they choose to come to the table or what they choose to do with that opportunity will be their decision. It opens the door, and it's the right thing to do. I think it's probably just one of those little things that slips through the cracks that should have been corrected a long time ago. So I do hope that it passes, and I hope it passes UBCM as well. So thank you.
Director Gisborne.
Thank you. I know we've had a bunch of discussion about C3 and private meetings and all this kind of stuff, and I want to make sure that we're very clear. Section 92B of the community charter reads, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and a provincial government, or the federal government, or both, or between a provincial government or the federal government, or both, and a third party. That is in reference to regional districts and municipalities going into a closed session for our meetings. That's regional district or municipality. That's for us to go into a closed session. And what that says is, if there's a negotiation between our board and the province, or our board and the feds, we got to go in camera. That's what the legislation says. Director Dowd is correct. Treated First Nations are not creatures of the province. They have an agreement with the Crown and or the feds and the province. Like each treaty is unique. This motion is asking UBCM to consider that the legislation be changed so that way regional districts and municipalities, if they have a request and information received from a treated First Nations, then we have the option to go in camera to then receive that information. It doesn't bind or restrict the treated First Nation, and I presume, just like the province or the feds, when they send us information, they get to make the choice of saying, that regional district, this is in camera, that regional district, we'll send this to your open session. It's the province kind of says, this is what you get to do. And I presume that would be the same way if a treated First Nation sends us information, they would then be able to say, we would like this in closed session or this in public session. Right now, we don't have the ability to just, okay, that'll go into closed session if you so choose, because they're not provincial and they're not federal, but they are also not local government like we are. Well, with the exception of the Seychelles Indian Government District, but that's a whole nother kettle of fish. So I do support this resolution, but I also share Director Doubt's concern that, you know, we don't have anyone from Tla'amin Nation here. We don't have any treaty First Nation here at this table. And this is a resolution being sent to the UBCM. And Tla'amin Nation is a member of the UBCM. They could make this motion to UBCM. So I would almost actually, I know I said I would support this motion, but now I'm honestly thinking maybe we should forward this motion to Tla'amin Nation and ask them if this is something that they would be interested in, you know, bringing to UBCM. Or because yeah, it does make me uncomfortable when I don't hate to use the term, but a room full of, I don't want to say colonists, but white folks going, well, this is what's best for working with Tla'amin and Indigenous folks. So I know I said I was in favor, but now I'm on the fence. So
Director Paul.
I'll be very brief. This part of the legislation of the community charter that affects local government is what I would call enabling legislation. It's not about regulating the federal government. It's not about regulating the provincial government. Adding First Nations to that list in Section 90 is not about regulating First Nations or telling First Nations what they can or cannot or should not do. It is about regulating and enabling local government. So if First Nations were added, if the province did as the request in the therefore clause was, that would enable local governments to have an increased ability to meet according to the provisions of Section 90. It would increase the toolbox available for local governments to meet with First Nations in different forms. It doesn't say the First Nations would want to meet that way or that it would be appropriate in all conditions. It would just add one more tool to the toolbox. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Seeing no other hands, call the vote or call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Director Dowd opposed. Director Fall, we can't see you anymore.
Oh.
I assume you were in support of it. So.
Oh, my camera went off for some reason.
Yeah, there you are.
There's my hand.
Thank you very much.
Must have hit it.
Move on to question period. Mr. Galinsky, are you on with us? Look here, Mr. Galinsky. Any other questions? Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting meeting. One particular comment that was made, I'd like a little clarification on concerns all of us politicians in this region, and that is CAO Radke made the comment that in order to have a 3C meeting, that it would be up to all of us at a table to sit down and basically agree as to how the process was going to move forward. Did he refer to that as a closed meeting?
Skip. Yeah.
Through the chair. It's my understanding, and I stand to be corrected, that the Tla'amin Executive Council has reached out to both the city and the RD for a meeting. And under Tla'amin law, only those that are invited into an executive council meeting are allowed in. Tla'amin members of the Tla'amin Nation aren't exactly allowed in unless they're invited in. So I can't say that it would be a closed meeting, but it would be under Tla'amin law.
So in terms of clarification, the community charter does not allow us to have a closed meeting at this time with those three entities, correct?
Yeah.
Through the chair. I believe you're taking it out of context. You can have a meeting whatever you want. And if you're being told you can't have a meeting, then I think you're being misled. Because you can have a meeting.
Referring to a closed meeting, not just a meeting.
You can have a closed meeting.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
Seeing none, we've got an in-camera session. So if somebody would like to.
Doesn't look too long. I think I should do
Yeah.
it. I move that the board move in camera. The meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91C, labor relations or other employee relations, K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a regional district service that are at their preliminary stages and that in view of the board could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the regional district if they were held in public. All discussions with regional district officers and employees respecting regional district objectives, measures, and progress reports for the purpose of preparing an annual report under section 98, annual regional district report, and the consideration of whether a board meeting should be closed under provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
Seconded by Director Elliott. Any discussion? All in favor? None opposed, motion carries. We're going in camera. Board.
That's where somebody's been depositing their waste for years.
Probably true.
We got some.
That's where they drop their garbage off.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We're back in open session.
Great, thanks. We have a rise and report. The board directed staff to enter into an agreement with Braun Geotechnical Limited to complete remaining geotechnical investigations, assessments, testing, and reporting regarding the Resource Recovery Center site, including construction of the access road. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Everybody, the meeting, good Monday, or I should say a good Wednesday.
Yeah, good.